Hey downtown van.
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 You're listening to Hey Downtown Van, hosted by the Downtown Vancouver BIA.
Hey Downtown Van, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Sofia Laratta, and today's guest is Stuart McNish, the host of Conversations That Matter and Conversations Live. He has over 35 years of journalism experience, and we are so honored to have him on today's podcast. So let's get into this conversation that matters. Take it away. All right, Stuart, thank you so much for being here. We're so honored to have you on the podcast today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you. So for those that are watching or listening that might not be familiar with your journey, could you just share a little snapshot of your life and how you got started in journalism?
My whole life?
From birth, no. Whatever you want to share.
Well, I will tell you that there was a pivotal moment in my life when I was about 11 years old. I was watching a television show that I used to like watching called Mr. Ed. Do you know about Mr. Ed?
Of course, talking
Mr.
horse.
Ed was the talking horse.
Ah.
And the guy who was the star in that show, talking to the talking horse, was a Canadian. And I went, oh, even though it was an American show, I guess Canadians can be on television too. And I got thinking, you know what? I think I really want to work in television. And I shared that with my mother, who immediately tried to disabuse me of that idea, saying, I don't think so. It's like, that's a hard business, and you got to be really good. So I inferred what her implication, which was maybe I'm not that good. So I kind of put off what I wanted to always do. I wanted to be a storyteller. But, you know, couple in with that, I was like so incredibly shy. I couldn't talk to anybody in a room, let alone in front of a microphone. So I took a bold move when I was about 20 years of age. I went and joined Toastmasters and learned how to speak in public. And, you know, you start to get a little bit of feedback. Somebody goes, you're pretty good at this. I am? Oh, okay. Confidence builds over time in doing things and getting a positive result.
Yeah.
And I realized that, you know, I was kind of a little bit of a natural born storyteller, partly because I would listen to my dad with fascination as he would come home and tell these wonderful stories about his day. And he had a job that most people go, but you're an accountant. How can you make accounting sound so interesting? It's because my dad was a natural born storyteller. So I guess I got a little bit of that by osmosis. And I thought, okay, well, what can I do with this? And I ultimately wound up sort of going back to school at BCIT when I was a little bit older, mid-20s, rather than straight out of high school and whatnot, and studied broadcast journalism. And, you know, I don't know if you've had this kind of experience where you're trying to work your way towards a goal, but there's an obstacle in your way. Okay,
Yes.
how am I going to get through this one? How am I going to get through that one? And all those obstacles were there for me. But as I would get to the obstacle, it was as though before I could reach the door handle to turn the knob and open the door just kind of opened. Okay, then I went through and then had to work my way up to the next one and the next one. And when I was coming out of school, they said, you know, you got to get this idea out of your mind, and not just to me, but to anybody else who was in the class. You're not going to get a job in Vancouver in broadcasting. It's a well-established industry. You're going to have to go work out in a small town and work your way up. Okay, that makes sense to me. But I went, okay, what am I going to do? Well, I called the Shaw cable outlet that wasn't too far from where I lived, and I said, I'm in the broadcast journalism program. I want to volunteer. I want to learn anything. I'll run a camera. I'll learn how to do audio, this, that, and the next thing. And they went, well, why don't you have a show? And I went, what?
Wow.
When was this?
That was in 1987.
Okay.
And I remember I was so nervous on the first day. I go, I'm finishing up the program. And how did I put it? I went, I wanted to say I'm Stu McNish, good night, but it came out, I'm Stu Ganesh. I was like,
Do you still get nervous ever?
yes, I do. I get nervous every time because I always worry that maybe I missed something, that my energy might not be right, that I'm not paying proper attention, all kinds of things. So, yeah, it's still there.
Okay.
But, I worked my way through that. I had a job at Equity Magazine. I was going to school. Between first and second year, there was a fluke sort of opportunity that came about to be a researcher in the newsroom at CKVU. In the last sort of week before going back to school, it was supposed to be a 3-day gig. But after the second day, they went, "Do you think you could come back next week?" And I went, "Sure." And then they went, "Well, could you come back next week as well?" And I went, "No, but I'm supposed to be back in school." Well, how about if we talk to your instructors and see if you can stay one more week? And I went, "Okay." And then that turned into a part-time job.
Wow.
And so then I was doing part-time there. I was doing part-time at Equity Magazine. I was going to school. And there was a program, a component of the program that if you had a practicum that you could go to, you could leave the like day-to-day going to school and go do that practicum, but you still had to turn in assignments and whatnot. But it had to be sort of like 40 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
Well, neither Equity or CKVU wanted to give me 40 hours a week, but combined, they were giving me like 60 hours a week.
Nice.
And so I sort of pled my case to the school and said, well, let me do the two, and I'll finish off all of this. So I would go to Equity Magazine, get on my bike, race across like crazy to get to CKVU and do some stuff at night, back and forth. And I thought, okay, I really like it here at CKVU. There was an opportunity that came up to be a reporter, but there's hierarchy in place and somebody else got that job. But in the meantime, I got a call from somebody saying, will you come and talk to us at BCTV? And so this is 1988. And BCTV is like the powerhouse of media. It's global now, okay, so I go see them. Like, you want to talk to me? Yeah, we understand that you're a pretty good researcher, and we'd like to offer you a job to come and work here. Wow. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
And so I went and I started there doing research. And in the first couple of months I'm there, I come back to my desk and there's a sheet of yellow foolscap with lines with 3 letters, WMI, and a question mark. And I'm going, what the heck is this? And who did it come from? And so I started asking around. Louise, who was the receptionist, wonderful person to work with. I'm going, do you have any idea? And she goes, oh, that's Keith. Well, that was Keith Bradbury. And he was like the intellectual nerve center, that guy was smart. Man, he was smart. And I'm thinking, well, I can't go and prove to him how stupid I am, not knowing what WMI is. So I started to just go, I better find out a few things before I go talk to him. It led to the investigation that I kind of undertook to begin with. It grew into a series that Harvey Oberfeld fronted. It led to the canceling of major contracts, huge scandal within sort of the greater Vancouver area. Harvey and I won multiple awards for doing that. And along comes Christmas. And, the senior staff are taking Christmas and whatnot. And of course, I'm junior and I'm working. And they go, why don't you try your hand at reporting? Okay. So my very first on-air story was on Christmas Eve.
No way.
And they said, so what would you like to do? And I said, well, I'd like to do kind of an unusual look at Christmas. Okay, what would it be? Well, I contacted the hospice at St. Paul's Hospital and said, I'd like to do an interview with somebody who knows that this is their last Christmas.
Oh.
And like...
sad.
Well, yes and no.
Yeah.
We have this tendency to say, oh, how terrible death. But when, I've now had so many interactions with people who are at that stage in life, and most people, it's a liberation for them. And to be able to talk about it, they're fully aware of the fact that there won't be another Christmas that they're going to see. So what is the meaning of Christmas? It was, of course, I'm nervous like you can't believe. And the cameraman who shows up to do the story was not in the most generous mood when he arrived. We're walking down the hall, and I tell him what the story was. He stops dead in his tracks and looks at me and goes, "Whose stupid idea was this?" Like, remember, I'm like, no confidence. I'm like on edge, the whole
so
works.
sad.
And I look at him and I go, "It was mine." And he goes, "Oh my God, this place is going to a hell in a handbasket." So
What a way to
yeah, it was
Were
like,
you even
crush your
20 years
spirit.
old yet?
I was in my mid-20s
You're at this
Still,
point.
though,
Okay.
it's like-
Yeah.
prime.
But, you know, these things help to actually define you. And over the years, I worked with that guy quite a bit, and he was an exceptional cameraman.
Aw.
And what he was concerned about, and to his credit, is he wanted to strive to have the highest possible level of quality, not only in the production of video, but in the content that was there. And to him, he was like so focused on, you know, what is the breaking story of the day. It was a tough little emergence. But a month and a half later, I get assigned, because they go, I did a few more stories, and they just kept me out reporting. They never actually pulled me back to do the research job that I had been hired to do. That was the beginning of my reporting career without anybody actually saying, "Congratulations,
You're a reporter."
You're a reporter."
How did that go? How did that story land with the public?
The Christmas story?
Yeah.
It went over really well.
Yeah.
And my grandmother really liked it.
Aw.
Oh, bless.
Because I made sure that I watched it with her.
Yeah. Aw.
But no, I got good feedback. And it's partly, I want to always look at things from a little bit different angle. I don't want to just have kind of the hackneyed, like, oh yeah, this is the way that you look at things.
Right.
So a few weeks later, I get assigned to go and see whether or not we can get a comment from Fei Liang. Do you know who Fei Liang was?
No, I don't.
She was a realtor, and she sold Fantasy Gardens for former Premier Bill Vander Zalm.
Oh.
And she was taking him to court because he didn't pay her sales commission.
Yikes.
Interesting.
And so, of course, okay, you got the premier, and he was premier at the time, is now being sued. And so she now becomes a hot topic for news. Okay, your time is expendable, Stu. You can go down and you can sit on her doorstep and see whether or not she'll come out. First day I show up, there's like 40 other media people there. She never comes to the door. I go back the next day. Now there's like 15 people there. Doesn't come out. I go back the day after with a cameraman, and I'm the only one there. Knock on her door. She doesn't come to the door. I thought, I'm going to go around to the back door. So I go around to the back door, and but I have to open the gate to go into her property, and it set off an intruder alarm. And I was like, uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
And she sticks her head out the window, and she goes, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Stu McNish. I'm here with BCTV. What do you want?" I said, "Well, I want to talk to you about your suit against Bill Vander Zalm." "Oh, okay. Okay, I meet you at the front door." And she comes out. She's got these fancy hats. She became known as the Hat Lady because she had really interesting hats. She shows up on the doorstep, delivers "I know Bill Vander Zalm to pay me because I saw blah, blah, blah." And she makes an allegation against him. And that clip led ultimately to Bill Vander Zalm being under so much pressure that he resigned.
Wow.
And from then on, I started getting better and better assignments.
Yeah.
And I wound up having a tremendous career at BCTV. I did a whole investigation into the Nanaimo Commonwealth Holding Society that was like 40 or 45 stories, and really kind of got to the bottom of that. I broke open all the stuff about leaky condos in in Vancouver
Mm-hmm.
and so on. Like, what were the building codes? And I remember doing this fabulous and fascinating series about what was happening in the forest industry, and that wound up having putting pressure on the government to change the Forest Practices Code. Like, it was a great job
Mm-hmm.
because you could affect change by telling stories that delivered different perspectives, held people accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And for 9.5 years, I really, really enjoyed doing it.
I
And
have
then
a
I quit.
question. Did you have just a natural sense that a story was going to be huge, or did it unfold and surprise you?
Well, sometimes you don't know. I
Right.
remember Glenn Clark was the finance minister in Mike Harcourt's government, and he delivers his first budget. And Clem Chappell had been the legislative reporter for BCTV. He comes out of the budget lockup, phones over, and so Clem's going to do the larger story about what was in the budget. But he had phoned over to Clive Jackson, who was the assignment editor, and said, Clive, there's an interesting little clause in here for anybody who's selling a home that's worth more than, I think it was $500,000 at the time. There was going to be this extra tax. And Clive, and I'm in Burnaby at this time. It's 4:00. We go to air at 6, and Clive goes, "Can you quickly zip into Vancouver, or we'll get John McCarran, who's the cameraman, to meet up with you, do something, and can you be back here to have a piece about this off the top of the show?" So drive in, drive back. You got to edit all these things. Okay, phone John when I'm on the way. I'll meet you at the corner of 41st and Granville. And we went in one block. There's a woman who is working in her garden. And I come up to her with John and the camera, and I go, "Have you heard this?" And she goes, "What?" She goes ballistic. And she goes, "My husband and I bought this house when it was a dump. We put our entire blood, sweat, and tears into this. And you're telling me because it's now appreciated in value, my property?" Well, and so Glenn Clark and the premier are sitting down to watch coverage, and they're expecting, okay, here's going to be this coverage about our budget. I did make it back to the station in time. I remember I drove down the shoulder of the highway. People were honking at me to get to the station, which is an inconvenient location out in Burnaby. Boom, we slammed that tape into the deck just as they're ready to roll the story. And it's only like a minute and 45 seconds. I had no idea what that story was going to ignite.
Yeah.
Gordon Campbell jumped on it. They put on rallies. It grew to be like something that was huge.
Wow.
From one little thing. Sometimes you think, okay, this is going to be big, and other times you have no idea, and it takes off.
What did that feel like for you to create a story that had that kind of impact? Like, what does that feel like?
I don't know. I really don't know, because in that business, that's nice. Glad that worked out. What do you got for me today? So it's always you're thinking, what's next? What's next?
Yeah.
What's coming? What do I have to stay on top of? Because the pressure is on, especially in an organization that is by far and away like the market leader. So the focus is always forward. Not a whole lot of reflection on, wow, look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't actually have an answer for that. Yeah.
So you went from working for what is now Global, but it was BC
TV. Isn't that fun?
That's so funny.
What? BC. And they had a great slogan. Johnny Michel had come up with that slogan when he was at BC TV. He went on to the Multicultural Channel, and then he was the head of CBC for the last 10 or 15 years. But he had a great slogan. It's BC TV. It's TV for BC.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's so simple, but it took him to see it.
Yeah.
And phrase it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah, I left there.
Yeah. And then now you do Conversations Live, which we were talking about, and Conversations That Matter.
That's part of what I do. I left not to do that. I left to go start my own video production company because I want to be a storyteller my whole life. I loved working in video. I saw that we were going to be able to move away from using VHS as the delivery method for people and organizations to CD-ROM. And I thought, we can take video and put it on a CD-ROM, and you can put it into your computer rather than having to have a TV and a deck and everything like that. So I thought, okay, there's some potential here.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea what I was doing, no idea how to run a business, nothing. I started with maybe $2,000, a car, a leased laptop, and a cell phone.
Wow.
And that was it. And that's 26 and a half years ago.
Wow.
So start doing videos. But the first call I got wasn't about doing videos at all. It was, come on down and teach us how to be prepared for when a reporter like you walks through the door. And so a parallel kind of stream of business started right then, and I still do that today.
Media training.
Media training.
Nice.
And I don't advertise it other than right now, I guess. But it's just, it comes to me word of mouth, and I do, maybe 5 or 6 of those a year.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. But then I got going along, and then Rob Germain, who had worked with me at BCTV, decided that he wanted to move closer to where he grew up, which was Victoria. So he switched over to Check TV, which was owned by the same group. He's sitting there one day, and they get the word that Global doesn't want to have 2 stations in this market any longer. They're going to, first of all, try and sell Check. Nobody wanted to buy it. Okay, we're going to close it down. And Rob went, no, you can't close it down. And so he went to bat to save Check TV. And they forced the hand of Global basically to hand it over to an employee group for $1. And it was gutted. Like there was virtually nothing there. And so starting from scratch, they started to build Check back up. And I talked to him and I said, look, I got an idea for a show. And he goes, okay, what would it be called? And I go, North of 49. North of 49. Yeah, being over 49, living in Canada, north of the 49th parallel. So we did about 26 episodes, half-hour show like that, about how to age well, and then kind of ran out of steam on that, and then went, well, let's do another one, Empowered Health. So we did 52 episodes of Empowered Health, which was a holistic approach to your well-being. Okay, that sort of ran its course. And then 10 years ago, I was at an event where then Premier Christy Clark arrived at, and it looked like she was going to get annihilated in the polls by Adrian Dix. And her short term as kind of caretaker premier after having taken over from Gordon Campbell, she was just like cascading downwards. Like, what's going on here? And I couldn't help but think that psychologically she's going, I'm not really the premier. Yes, I am, but I didn't win my own mandate. And going into the election, she didn't look that good necessarily as this is the person that you envisioned to be your premier. But something happened about 2 weeks out from the election, and I watched the transformation right in front of my eyes as she walked through this room about to give a presentation, and I went, she suddenly became the premier. Like, it was like she owned it. And I went, wow. About 6 months later, I'm talking to one of my clients, and I'm saying, I would love to know what went through her mind. And my client said, well, why don't you ask her? And I go, she's the premier now. Like, you don't just have access to this person, even though I had known her from before. I'd have to have a television show or something. And my client goes, well, why don't you create one? You got all the stuff. You got the studio, you got the gear, you got the crew, you've got the experience. Oh, okay, what would that look like? So I went and had a coffee with Mike Benier of the Pacific Salmon Foundation. I want to give them a plug because they do such great work. And I was telling him about it, and he says, you better do it. If you don't, I'm going to kick your butt. And so he kind of nudged me forward, and I started Conversations That Matter. My number one objective was to do I never did have that conversation with Premier Clark, but it was enough to sort of spur me on. My number one consideration was what do we need to do in this country to bring about true reconciliation with First Nations.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that bothers me.
Mm-hmm.
Still bothers me, but where we are today versus where we were then, we're worlds apart.
Yeah.
And everything is moving in the direction that you go, yeah. To the point now where you would say that First Nations are the key to economic growth and development in Canada. Like they hold the key
Yeah.
in a way that is liberating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting to see. And so I started that like 10 years ago. And then 3 years ago, coming out of COVID, during COVID, we had really developed this expertise about being able to do live virtual events and make them look like a television show rather than a Zoom meeting. And I went, okay, that opportunity is going to go away. And it did for a while. It seems to be coming back now.
Yeah.
People are sort of going, well, you can do it where we have an in-person audience, but we can also now have a live online audience, and through Slido or whatever,
Yeah.
they can send in questions and be a part of it. And it gets recorded, and you can create social media clips out of it. So it's coming back in ways that I hadn't quite anticipated,
Mhm.
which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to continue on in this public affairs realm.
Mm-hmm.
Because I like it so much. I talked to Harold Monroe at the Vancouver Sun and said, look, I want to create these events, Conversations Live, where we have an in-person audience, we have a panel of experts, and we're live on the Vancouver Sun at the same time. And so that's sort of the genesis of where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
But, the world is all about relationships. One of the people that I had interviewed a number of years ago for Conversations That Matter was Chief Perry Bellegarde, who at the time was the national chief for the Assembly of First Nations. And during the conversation, he was talking about, how do we move forward? He said, we have to be able to build relationships. And I went, yes. And he said, because if you can't build relationships, you can't build anything. I
Very
wrote
true.
that down on a piece of paper and stuck it to my wall
Mhm.
afterwards. It gave attribution to him.
Mm-hmm.
Relationships are everything. I told you about Rob Germain earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Rob, as we're coming out of COVID, goes, Stu, we got a couple of things that we'd like to produce in Vancouver. And you got a little bit of extra space in your studios, don't you? Yeah. Do you think that we could maybe do a daily sports talk television show? Okay, well, what would it look like? And he goes, I don't know, just a single camera, and it would be like these guys talking to one another, kind of like radio on TV. And I went, oh, Rob, that stinks. I got extra cameras. I got a couple of extra cameras, old ones that we're not using. We can repurpose them. Chewing gum, baling wire, duct tape. We put together a studio. If you go in there now, like we were in there this morning, recording in what we call the Paul Carson studio, because Don, Czech TV, Rob Germain, we all had a connection to Paul Carson, who is a legend in sports netcasting.
Mm-hmm.
His family was in there this morning because
Aw.
they're sort of going, isn't this cool? You name this after our dad.
That is really cool.
And so we do, Donnie and Dolly, the team, every day out of that studio. Once a week we do Mo Amir's Van Color. We do another show. It's called Now You Know. We do another show called Carol Taylor's Journal, which is on Czech, Bell, Pattison, and Conversations That Matter as well.
Mm-hmm.
As well as live events and videos for a whole range of clients.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're busy.
Yeah, very
So
busy.
Conversations Live is a part of my life.
Mm-hmm. I do have a
Okay.
question for you,
Okay.
if you don't mind me going first. So, long form conversations that matters, long form conversations.
Mhm.
I would even assume Conversations Live is long form conversations
It
as
is.
well.
Yes.
How do you feel about now short form content and how little tiny clips of one conversation are going more viral than people sitting down and watching a long conversation? Do you see that there's a shift, or do you still think that people are wanting long form conversations?
Well, there are segments of audiences. And for Conversations That Matter, for Carol Taylor's Journal, for Conversations Live, there is a portion of the population that wants to dig into that.
Mhm.
And they love the fact that we go beyond just the headlines. We look at the trend lines. We dig into the details. And those people want that.
Mm-hmm.
I know I want it,
Mm-hmm.
and I have trouble finding it. So that's part of why I wanted to create it. But it is not the kind of audience segment that you go, you know, advertisers are going to be lining up to get behind this. They're going to go, yeah, okay. But out of it, we have an incredible vault of content. And so now we break it down.
Right.
And we give it to those people who want it in the short clip form.
Yeah.
There's a snippet. There's another one. There's another one. If you want to know more, you can go here, but you don't have to. But you get something that comes out of that.
Yeah.
But what comes out of long form is a completely different kind of exchange. With short clips, people go, okay, what are we talking about today? Here's my focus. This is my message. I deliver that message. You don't actually get to know the person.
Mm-hmm.
We're having a longer form conversation here.
Mm-hmm.
You get to see me. You get to see me thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sitting here with notes going, okay, I'm reading all this.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting me raw.
Mm-hmm.
And we communicate so many things. So Aristotle, when he talks about sort of the basics of rhetoric, says you have logos, ethos, pathos. And so you got to have logic. To be a good communicator, you have to have logic. Even whether or not you're creating a small clip or a longer one, it has to make sense. But you also have to have credibility. So who are you to that audience? So people who are great sports fanatics, they're never going to listen to me. They're going to go, who are you? And what do you know about sports? Well, I can tell you a lot about tennis, but nothing else. And so they want to tune into somebody to go, I trust you as being a good source.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to have the right emotional tone. Well, if you're only focused on producing short stuff, it gets harder and harder, unless you're an actor, to create like an emotional tone that is a reflection of who you are. And so with longer form, I'm turning to you, you're an expert. I want you to think out loud in front of this audience so that they can go on that journey with you, but they get to know you. And as I say, then I also get short form content that I can take out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Bob Rennie, who supports what we do, he says, I sort of feel like what you're doing is you're giving an opportunity because I have differing voices and whatnot on these panels, to kind of weave topics into this fabric. And he says, and then he sort of pauses and he goes, and we need that right now. And so I think we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not, as I say, it's not going to be a runaway hit.
Mm-hmm.
Can we go back to something you said earlier? And it's been on my mind quite a bit, actually, since we've been talking. And you mentioned about how like one door just sort of opened for you, one after another. What about somebody starting out right now?
Uh-huh.
How is it different? Is it possible for them to have that same sort of path? And I don't want to say ease, because I know you work so hard, but that same sort of good fortune, I guess, is the question. What do you think about that?
Seeing as you never really know where anything's going to go,
Yeah.
I don't think that you can say that I can sit here and say, oh, this is what's going to happen, or like this is the exact trend, or whatever. And so I didn't start with a business plan. I had no business plan. People would go, what's your business plan? To produce videos. Okay, and I don't know. Like, I can't sit there. I can't do an analysis. My former boss, who's still a mentor and a friend of mine, Ron Bremner, he had been the president at BCTV when I was there. One time I was having breakfast with him, and he goes, oh, so who's your competition? I said, I don't know. And he goes, well, maybe you should go find out. And I go, why? Like, what can I do about them? I can't do anything about them. He goes, well, when you were reporting, you knew who your competition was. And I said, no, I didn't. I didn't pay any attention to them. All I can do is focus on what I can do. And so occasionally these days, I get people who will say to me, well, what do you think I should do to get started? And I say, start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Start. If you're only staying in the realm of the idea, that's where it stays.
Yeah.
But once you start to put something in motion, then you affect change and you send different messages. But you have to have patience. and you have to have determination, and you have to be willing to eat crummy meals for a long time and not go on vacation, and at times not go home because you're sleeping on the floor at the office, and you give up a lot.
Yeah.
Like you take a look at the rate of entrepreneurship in Canada right now, it is really low. Go back to 1960, the proportion of Canadian population that were entrepreneurs was considerably higher than the portion of the American population that were entrepreneurs. And yet, the United States is the land of milk and honey and whatnot. They weren't taking the same kinds of chances as Canadians were. Today, it's the other way around. So what happened in Canada? Well, it's really hard.
Yeah.
And as a small business, there's so many things that get put into place that you go, okay, well, if those are the rules, then I can't afford to hire that person. It's too expensive.
Yeah.
So then you don't hire them. But anyways, going back to, can somebody get there? Yeah. But boy, you got to be willing to make all kinds of sacrifices, pay huge prices.
Yeah.
You have to really want to do it, because you'll lose friendships. It most likely will destroy your primary relationship. And it's challenging. There isn't just sort of like, okay, you go back to the days when, let's say, BCTV was getting started, and it was challenging for them too, but they had hardly any competition. Well, today there's so much competition, no matter what sector you go into. And in Canada, trying to put a product out and get yourself into the supply lines and make it work, well, starting small, really challenging. But that doesn't mean you can't do it.
Yeah.
There has to be this determination. I did an interview with Anthony Von Mandel a couple of years ago. You know who he is? Mission Hill, and he's a gazillionaire now. He started selling wine to restaurants out of the trunk of his car when he was 19. Had no money. And I said to him, "Where'd you get the gumption to do that?" And he starts laughing. He goes, "Yeah, kind of crazy, isn't it?" But what did he do? He just put himself out there.
Yeah.
And every time you face an obstacle, you go, I'm to the point now where if something goes a little bit sideways, I go, wow, you never know when you're having good luck. Even though on the surface you think it's not. But what does it do? It forces you to go, this isn't working. Well, what can I do? What can I do? I could do that. And then you try that. Well, maybe it doesn't work, but it opens up something else. In an audiobook that I narrated a number of years ago, there was a bit in there about Ronald Reagan saying that he wanted to disabuse people of the idea that the only people to celebrate are those who have been successes. And he said, no, the people who are the real heroes are the people who try. Because just by trying, you affect change and you bring other energy to what you're doing. And while you may not necessarily realize the success of this, you've attracted other energy that spawns another idea. And maybe that's the thing that happens. But without the person who tried, that may not have happened. And so that's what I say. Start.
Yeah.
So you also said that you like to look at things from a different angle, and I think you do an exceptionally good job of that. I really love listening to your work. You bring in some amazing guests who offer very different perspectives. In the spirit of looking at things from a different angle, did anybody ever change your mind completely on something, or just sort of blow your mind in the middle of an interview?
All the time.
Yeah.
Like constantly. Last week, Andrew Day from the BC Parks Foundation was in, and we were recording an interview that we're going to release next week because to try and coordinate it a little bit with Earth Day. Their objective is to try to get 30% of British Columbia protected under sort of parks designation by 2030. And I said, okay, well, where are you at right now? And he said, 19%. That's where we're at. I went, okay, you're still a fair ways away. And he goes, yeah, well, just 11%. I said, Andrew, you know as well as I do, the first 19% is way easier than the last 11%. Every percentage point's going to get harder and harder and harder. And he goes, yeah, you're right. Why? Because there isn't the available space that's not impacted by human activity. And he said, so maybe we're in a position where in British Columbia, we can do something really unique and interesting. we can look at park space as being mixed use. We don't have to say that the two have to be mutually exclusive. No, you can't have any human activity. And he said, why not? Why can't we be the place that creates the model? I hadn't thought about it before. I sort of thought, Andrew, you're a heretic, but he's not, of course. So like constantly people are opening my eyes to things that I go, I hadn't thought of that. And that's why I want to have those conversations. Really what drives me is I just want to learn.
Yeah.
My final question to you is, if you've interviewed so many people, so many diverse people, so many incredible people, is there anyone not with us today or alive that is like your dream interview or you just want to interview?
I saw that you sent me that question, and I thought, I'll tell you, I was out at a place in Abbotsford called West Mill Industries. You know what they make? They make ovens for drying wood that's going to become plywood.
Interesting.
And I'm like fascinated. Holy smokes, how does that work? And I'm interviewing one of the designers or whatnot, and he said, wow, you must get to interview a lot of really interesting people. And my response to him was, like you.
Oh, that's nice.
I get to interview people who are hanging off of telephone poles, deep underground in mines. Like I get to go to places that you can't go to even if you want to buy a ticket. Like you can't get there. And these are not people who are flying around in corporate jets or wearing, expensive clothing and all that sort of stuff. Even though they're interesting, it's the people who are passionate about their work. And what I find so interesting is most people really care about doing good work. And if you're interested in what they do, then they share. If you're not interested, well, then they don't. And because I have this undying fascination with what anybody does, and somebody tells me, I'm in HVAC, I go, oh my God, like you are the most important person in the building. And they go, huh? And I go, well, when the HVAC doesn't work, everybody's complaining, but we don't think about you when it does work. And then you start thinking about HVAC. We're creating artificial cold. Well, where'd that concept come from? And without artificial cold, you couldn't run this office. You couldn't have the food processing businesses that exist right now, computers, supercomputers, AI. Like without being able to have this connection to being able to create an artificially cold environment, our society wouldn't work. And you're at the heart of making sure that it does work. And so, like, those are the people who are like the most interesting to me. The people who reach some sort of position where they're like so much in charge, they don't actually have conversations with you the same way. They tell you stuff. And like, I want to be with people who you go, oh, really? Well, hang on a second. I thought, that's different than what I thought. And then they help you learn. So it's anybody who's fascinated and enjoys what they're doing in life.
I love that. And anyone that fascinates you and you want to learn more about, I think that's really very interesting and probably what makes you so good at journalism.
Well, thank you for that compliment. And I hope that I'm getting to the point where I'm reasonably okay at the job that I'm doing.
I have a final question. Building off of that, is there one person that you would still really love to interview that you haven't sat down with yet? Anybody?
Well, I'm back and forth on this because the answer is yes and no. But if I could find an opportunity to really have in-depth conversation with anybody, it would be Bill Clinton.
Interesting.
That guy.
Why?
Well, what a life.
Yeah.
I was fascinated by him as a thinker. And this is in the realm of you never know what is and isn't important in life. but it's like having dinner with him wouldn't be enough.
Yeah.
It would be because you only get the veneer at that
You need to
point.
live with him.
Yeah, which I think would be impossible.
Yeah.
Poor guy, he'd have to put up with me.
He was the first president I ever voted for.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and from that very first election that I voted in, my family was like, "What? Why on earth? Why on earth would you go in this direction?" And from the start, I always admired him as well. And
Yeah.
again, as you say, flawed human being, but I've always admired him as well. So I would listen to that interview.
I would listen to that interview too. He sounds so
Yeah,
interesting.
it would be interesting.
Yeah.
I even used to do a little Bill Clinton imitation.
Oh, do it. Can you do it for us?
Well, I don't know. I can't do it
It's a
right now
good
because I haven't done it in a long time.
I could see where you were going
Was
with it.
he the one with the mistress that was his assistant?
Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah,
I think
Monica
she
Lewinsky.
just released like a memoir.
See, that
Yeah.
would be an interesting interview
That'd
as
be-
well.
Well, her
She was
life was
interviewed.
destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
destroyed. And, what'd she do? I mean, she was a young woman in the presence of a man with the ultimate
Powerful.
power in the world.
the president of the
Yeah.
United States.
Yeah.
So sad.
I feel
I,
very, very badly for the challenges that she went through.
She seems to be doing well,
I think so. now.
right?
Yeah.
Like I've followed her since that time as well, and she also just seems like a really decent human
Mhm.
being, and I'm glad for her that things seem to be okay. You
Yeah.
know, as far as we can tell. But yeah, she broke my heart a little bit,
Yeah.
or my heart broke for her. Let's put it that
Right.
way. Yeah.
Good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for being here. And your story is so interesting. And I can't wait to come to a conversation live.
Please do.
Yes.
They're so good.
It's an audience of engaged people.
Mm-hmm.
Like you get to, I got great sponsors who give us space and they cater it and they, look after us and create an opportunity for really interesting and interested people to meet one another as well as have the conversation.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
They're very good. I think you'll like them.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Hey Downtown Van. We really hope you enjoyed today's episode with Stuart McNish. If you'd like to learn more about our organization and all that we do, you can visit our website, dtvan.ca, or you can check us out on socials at Hey Downtown Van.